Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, let's begin this morning with the latest in the presidential race. Kamala Harris has taken her bid to court conservative voters to Fox News. The vice president promised her presidency would not be a second Joe Biden administration.
Like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas.
Vice President Harris's interview with Fox anchor Brett Baier turned testy almost from the first question when he asked whether she regretted reversing former President Donald Trump's border policies.
The first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the... Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please?
Kamala Harris's Fox News interview capped off a day where she appeared in suburban Philadelphia with dozens of Republican officials who have endorsed her campaign.
Well, Nathan, former President Trump, meanwhile, held a town hall with Latino voters on the Spanish-language Univision network. One voter asked if Trump really believed that Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, have eaten people's pets.
This was just reported. I was just saying what was reported. That's been reported. And eating other things, too, that they're not supposed to be. But this is all I do is report. I was there. I'm going to be there. And we're going to take a look, and I'll give you a full report when I do.
Donald Trump was also asked about his role in the Capitol riot on January 6th. The former president said nothing was done wrong that day.
Ashley Babbitt was killed. Nobody was killed. There were no guns down there. We didn't have guns. The others had guns.
Trump has ignored other deaths in the days and weeks after the insurrection. And when asked about any mistakes from his first term, Trump suggested his only error was hiring certain people in his administration.
Well, meanwhile, Karen, billionaire investor Stan Druckenmiller says if the markets are any indication, Donald Trump will win the election. Druckenmiller spoke with Bloomberg's Sonali Basak.
I remember how right the market was on Ronald Reagan in 1980, despite what the pundits were saying. And I must say, in the last 12 days, the market and the inside of the market is very convinced Trump is going to win. You can see it in the bank stocks. You can see it in crypto.
Stan Druckenmiller says he won't vote for either Harris or Trump. He calls Trump a blowhard, while he says a Harris presidency would be bad for business.
Well, let's get to the latest developments in the Middle East now, Nathan. U.S. B-2 stealth bombers have struck weapons storage sites linked to Houthi rebels in Yemen. It's the latest effort to blunt attacks by the Iran-backed group that have roiled commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says the use of the B-2 bombers was intended to send a message. Despite numerous strikes by Israel and the U.S. on the Houthis, the allies have so far been unable to halt its attacks.
All right, let's turn to markets now, Karen. Futures are pointed higher ahead of yesterday's small cap rally on Wall Street. Of course, that was after that rally. The Russell 2000 index of smaller firms closed at its highest level in almost 3 years. This morning, NASDAQ futures are getting a lift after Taiwan Semiconductor raised its revenue outlook for the year, easing concerns about global chip demand and the sustainability of an AI hardware boom.
Well, earnings continue to be a focus for the markets here, Nathan. Today, Netflix will lead nearly a dozen companies reporting. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Tom Busby.
Investors are expecting even more gains in subscriber growth thanks to that successful password crackdown and more growth in advertising revenue as the streaming giant airs more live events like the 2 NFL games it'll be streaming for the first time on Christmas Day this year. Bloomberg consensus calls for subscriber adds of 4.47 million, revenue of $9.78 billion, and earnings per share of $5.12. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Tom, thank you. Well, bank results led by Morgan Stanley have hit it out of the park, but one popular consultant says the best days may be over for the big financial firms. In its annual State of the Industry report, McKinsey warns that higher profits enjoyed by global banks over the last 2 years could prove fleeting. It predicts headwinds are gathering steam, led by lower interest rates and flagging loan demand.
Well, Nathan, it's a busy morning on the economic front. We will get the latest reading on retail sales, jobless claims, and industrial production. Ian Shepherdson, editor-in-chief at Pantheon Macroeconomics, says despite this morning's readings, the Fed should keep on cutting rates.
This obsession that the markets have, and sadly some people at the Fed have, with the latest data just drives me nuts. Whatever you do to policy now makes no difference to the economy for at least a year. And the data are not telling you anything about the current stance of policy. They're telling you about the stance of policy 12 to 18 months ago. And since then, it's become significantly tighter.
Macroeconomics Ian Shepherdson says due to industrial strife at Boeing and Hurricane Milton, the October jobs report is more uncertain than usual.
In Europe this morning, Karen, the European Central Bank is widely expected to cut interest rates for a second consecutive meeting. Just 5 weeks after its last reduction, analysts polled by Bloomberg unanimously predict a quarter-point ECB reduction to 3.25%.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. A Georgia judge has declared that 7 new election rules recently passed by the state election board are illegal, unconstitutional, and void. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Thomas Cox issued the order yesterday after holding a hearing on challenges to the rules. The rules that Cox invalidated include 3 that had gotten a lot of attention. 1 required that the number of ballots be hand counted after the close of polls, and 2 that had to do with the certification of election results. The family of the Menendez brothers are supporting the prison release of the 2 men who shot and killed their parents in Beverly Hills in 1989. Nearly 24 family members of Eric and Lyle Menendez say they now believe the brothers were victims and were molested by their father. They also say that the murders were not in cold blood, but instead the then young men were in fear for their lives. Lyle and Eric's attorney, Mark Garagos.
It corroborates what the family members said was the very uncomfortable rule in that house that you could not go down the hallway if Jose was with one of the boys.
It is now up to the Los Angeles County DA whether he will recommend their release from prison. The music industry is in mourning. Former One Direction singer Liam Payne was found dead in Buenos Aires at just 31 years old. Buenos Aires police say that Payne fell from the 3rd floor of a hotel balcony. After the band split in 2015, Payne embarked on a solo career. Authorities are investigating the circumstances of his death. President Biden, former Presidents Obama and Clinton, and members of the Kennedy family attended a memorial service for Ethel Kennedy at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle in Washington. Former President Clinton.
She was an amazing fireball of continuous energy. It was wonderful to be around her.
The widow of Robert F. Kennedy was 96 when she died a week ago. The Biden administration says it has marked a new milestone in the president's effort to forgive student loans. Biden announced today that he has approved $4.5 billion in student debt cancellation for around 60,000 public servants. The administration says the total number of workers who have received relief exceeded 1 million since Biden took office. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. It's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. It's brought to you by Tri-State Audi, and here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Second time, and now 3 NLCS games where Mets bats were quiet, managed only 4 hits, all singles. The Dodgers scratched across a couple of runs second inning. Kike Hernandez hit a 2-run homer in the 6th, and 2 innings later, 2 on for Shohei.
This is a towering drive down the line. Ohtani's broken through. It is gone. A majestic home run into the second deck. 7-0 LA.
Fox Sports call Max Muncy homer to the 9th. Dodgers, who won Game 1 9-0, took Game 3 8-0, leaving Mets manager Carlos Mendoza down 2-1 and asked about possible lineup changes for Game 4.
So guys that are in there got us to this point, and I'm pretty confident that they'll come true, and yeah, you're playing playoff, and when you're facing a pitching staff like that, it's gonna be hard at times. We're creating traffic, I like the fact that we're getting guys on base. just haven't been able to come up with a big hit.
Game 4 tonight after Game 3 of the ALCS in Cleveland. Yankees up 2-0 going with Clark Schmidt, Matthew Boyd for the Guardians. Speaking of Game 3s, WNBA Finals in Minnesota, the Liberty, who blew an 18-point lead in Game 1, this time came from 15 down, beat the Lynx 80-77 on a Sabrina Ionescu 30-foot shot with 1 second left. Liberty can win the first championship in team history tomorrow. A day after news that Giants tackle Andrew Thomas would be out a while came MRI results. He needs surgery on his foot. Thomas done for the year. Giants Sunday host Philadelphia, the return of Saquon Barkley. He said he has no hate for his former team, still talks with many of his former teammates. Barkley said he hopes the fans don't boo him. The newest Jet, Devontae Adams, will see at least some playing time Sunday night in Pittsburgh. John Stash Hour, Bloomberg Sports. Karen, Nathan?
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. Kamala Harris is promising to be the change candidate. With less than 3 weeks to go until the election, the vice president made an appeal to conservative voters in an interview on Fox News.
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
For more on the state of the race in this final stretch, we are joined by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. Interesting to hear the vice president try to distance herself from President Biden when almost from the beginning of this interview, the vice president was defending the Biden-Harris administration's record on immigration. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it was a very fiery, testy interview there on Fox News for the vice president. She took a lot of very direct questions right off the bat about the administration's record on immigration, and of course she said that there was an immigration proposal that President Trump had a role in vetoing over the last year, but, took some very hard questioning about, what was going on before that since she took office. Brett Baer asking her whether she, needed to apologize to people whose family members or friends had been killed by undocumented migrants who were in the country at the time. Asked to explain why she said the border was secure when during the interview she said that it's a broken immigration system. So it was some very pointed questions, and I think each side, whether people are on the Harris side or on the Trump side, I think they're going to hear what they wanted to in that. But it was one of the most direct exchanges we've seen the vice president take in this short campaign.
Given that idea that people are going to hear what they want to hear in an exchange like that, I mean, how important is it for Vice President Harris to go ahead with this strategy that we seem to be seeing from her of trying to court conservative voters and broaden her tent when we do see this race in poll after poll showing things really airtight?
Yeah, it's so hard to know what could possibly move the needle at this point, given how tight the race is and all the drama we've seen in this whole election cycle, including 2 attempted assassination attempts. Listen, I think the vice president is trying to make a pitch toward more conservative folks out there, Republicans who are still perhaps never Trumpers, maybe people who supported Trump the first time around but aren't so sure. We saw some of that in a presentation the former President Trump had on Univision, where he actually faced one voter who said, "Hey, I'm a Republican. I'm no longer registered. I want to give you the opportunity to win back my vote," and went on to press former President Trump very directly as well about the events of January 6th and the storming of the Capitol and what he said, the president did and didn't do that day.
Yeah, interesting as well to see former President Trump engaged in a similar strategy here of possibly trying to reach out beyond his own base with this town hall with Latino voters. But at the same time, he's still kind of refusing to back down on some of this rhetoric around Haitian migrants and eating people's pets, these widely debunked claims, Bill.
Yeah, so we know that there has been a little bit of more support from Latino voters, particularly men, to the Trump campaign than we've seen in previous elections, and he's trying to build on that, I think. But you're right, he still kind of holds on to these things that are from what we can see in polls and surveys, kind of a turnoff for a lot of voters. This idea that in Springfield, Ohio, as you said, that Haitian immigrants are eating their pets. It's hard to see how that is, in the end, a winning strategy. But both candidates trying to find a way to expand that core group of support. You know, it's anywhere from 48% to 51% in these different states. And, you know, it's going to be in potentially some of these states a matter of a few thousand votes separating whoever gets the electoral votes from someone who doesn't. So it's a very tight race, and both sides trying to see what they can get at the margins.
In our last minute, Bill, let's talk about geopolitics. Are we starting to see signs of more direct engagement now from the U.S. in the Middle East with this report that B-2 stealth bombers have gone after Houthi weapons sites in Yemen?
Yeah, pretty dramatic show of power from the U.S. Military and the Biden administration overnight with these B-2 stealth bombers doing a round trip from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri all the way to Yemen. These are, these are some of the highest technology weapons the U.S. has in its arsenal. They were targeting missiles, weapons components, and other deeply buried ammunition that the Houthi rebels there are believed to have. We don't know if this is some kind of a softening up targets ahead of Israeli reprisal against Iran, but it's definitely seems to be a new stage in this conflict and a new way of the U.S. trying to flex some of its military might.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.